Hello, everybody. Welcome to Planet SkyFF, the world where everything revolves around £10,000. My name's Such.
And my name is James.
Not because I'm going to finish second, but because for the next 6 weeks, James, it's all about the 10 Gs.
I hate to break it to you. I don't think you'll finish second in the Premier League game.
No, I'm going to win it.
And I don't think it's 10 grand for second either.
Is it 5?
I think so.
Okay. Well, what happens if two people join? They split the prize. That could be a bit pony. They should give them 5 grand each.
I have no idea.
Well,
I bet they both give them a grand.
Today is Sky Fantasy Football, who have released a World Cup game, which is what we're going to spend most of the time talking about today. But we are now all on overhaul, James, which means we can make as many transfers as we like. I haven't even given it a moment's thought.
Literally none whatsoever in terms of Premier League overhaul. The focus from a fantasy perspective is very much on the World Cup game. I'm not going to profess that I know the ins and outs of Ecuador's fullbacks and stuff if people are waiting for that. I can tell you about Purvis Estupiñán will be quite popular because people know who he is as he plays for Brighton. But please don't consider me and such an expert on many of these countries that we haven't known.
That's what YouTube's for.
That said, obviously with the Sky format here, I think we can focus primarily on the major teams anyway. The pricing seems very reasonable to be able to put together a very good team, for example.
Nice. Before we get into World Cup, let's rattle off what happened in the final weekend.
Do we have to?
Of Sky Fantasy Football. How many points did you score, sir?
I probably could count them on one hand. 43.
Okay. Not great.
No, you're telling me. Dropped to 3,400, basically. It went against me somewhat in the sense, I'm sure many of us captained Haaland. Over 12,000 managers bought Haaland back in, by the way.
Yeah, I skipped
that game
it
on Saturday.
I decided that it wasn't worth it.
And all of you who came off have had an unbelievable result there in the sense that he's obviously blanked. So, I mean, I also had Wilfried Zaha's penalty miss on Saturday. I laughed at you on Monday. I'm not laughing at me today. I had Saliba's 10 points, Nick Pope's 8, 4 points for Salah. I did finally get signed off for Phil Foden, who I've had for a while now. 10-pointer, Martinelli's 5. You think all these little bits add up, but when you have a weekend with nothing from captaincy, I've got 2 points from my captains this week because I captained Haaland on Saturday, and I had Mitrovic, who I knew I wasn't going to play on Sunday. Adam Webster, I'm fine with that at home to Villa. I feel better for the fact that they lost 2-1 and he probably wouldn't have got much out of it. But yeah, obviously Brighton team dropped, no Adam Webster. And I messaged you, I went, you're taking the piss. What? So I spent a little bit of time thinking, my intention plan had been do absolutely nothing. And that's what I decided to do. Irony of irony, and this will feel like a hindsight comment, but had I bought someone, I would have bought McAllister. Because I would have thought he's got the most variety to be able to combine and get the passes, tackles, the shots, everything. Rather than purely relying on, say, someone like Rashford, who I might have considered going, he's got to score. McAllister could have picked me up, tackle and passed here. But what I thought about it was, the conclusion I came to is, what do I want out of this from a transfer? Like, if he gets me passing tier 2 and it's 5 points, okay, it's 10 points, be handy. Is that worth a transfer? No. So I probably need him to score, was the conclusion I came to. Anyway, 60 fucking seconds into the game, he has, hasn't he? And you're like, you've got to be kidding me. But I have no regrets about not buying him because I think for it to be worth it, he had to score.
Yeah.
And the chance of him scoring were unlikely.
No.
So that's what happened. So 43 points for the week. I'm 31 transfers on the other side. I would say 3,400 with the amount of transfers I've used is not great. Don't think I'll be finishing first from here, but certainly still capable of making, with that number of transfers left, a good assault for the running. Well, it's more than a running, isn't it?
2/3 of the season almost, mate.
What about you?
54 points, which obviously a little bit better. And I think the difference between us basically was that I had captains at return, so I didn't have Haaland, and I didn't make any transfers over the weekend. Mo Salah as captain, 4 points doubled up to 8, which is better than 1 doubled up to 2. It's not good, but it's better than 1 doubled up to 2.
I think that was the only solace for. I'll say
Some
solace.
still had Kane, but
Well, I was going to say plenty would have gone Kane, but Cancelo, Salah obviously haven't gone off.
No.
Or Kevin De Bruyne.
I had tier points bits and pieces everywhere other than Kieran Trippier, who returned really nicely for me. But David Raya picked up 5 points. Cancelo on 3. Van Dijk, 5. Trippier, 9. Casado, 4. Rodri, 5. I captained Paulinho on the Sunday. That was 5 points. Double up to 10.
9 tackles.
Yeah, he did well.
Most in a Premier League game this season. Do you know who's got the second most in a Premier League game this season?
Tackles in one game?
Yeah.
Declan Rice.
Paulinho.
Okay.
8 against Brighton.
I had blanks from Bowen and Scamacca, who basically, like West Ham, have been pony this since I've bought them. And Jesus didn't do anything for me either. I mean, assisting the assister with Vieira.
Jesus is on the border of a haul every week.
Every game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I couldn't sell him, and he didn't pick up his 5th yellow either. But yeah, tier points everywhere, but no one big going off, or no return. So I ended up not using any transfers. It leaves me just inside the top 5,000.
Did you captain Sunday?
Paulinho.
Ah, of course, yes, sorry.
I'm just inside the top 5,000, James. And I have 43 transfers left.
Fucking
Juicy!
hell. Do you think you'll use your 43 transfers?
Yeah. 100%. I'm going to be a lot more aggressive because the opportunities are going to be there. The other thing, though, James, that I've been looking at and measuring myself against to counterbalance my rank is how many points am I off the top 100? And I'm the same. It was 130 points off the top 100 the week before, and it's 130 points off the top 100 now without using a transfer. Yes, my rank's gone down by 1,000, but I don't care because I know the gap is still the same, and I've still got bullets in my gun, so to speak, to use in terms of transfers. So, yeah, very, very comfortable and really liking the consistency of the likes of Paulinho and Rodri just ticking along. Even Van Dijk with another 5-pointer despite no clean sheet. I mean, he could have hauled as well, really. So, yeah, really looking forward to the second half of the season. So yeah, all good. Did you want to cover off any interesting?
Yeah, just going
to
really just
any other suspensions.
I only spend sort of 5 minutes on it, but I'm really just going to skim over this because it's so long till we come back. But a few notables from the weekend to pick out. None of Manchester City's centre backs hit tier 2 passing, despite the fact they were obviously losing for a large part of the first half and obviously chasing a winning goal in the second half. I find that really surprising. So Cancelo might have hit it. He got taken off with a few minutes to go. He was on 64 passes. Laporte 69, Akanji 61. John Stones only 53. Rodri on 89. As you mentioned, Raya made 5 saves. Ederson also made 5. 6 shots on target for Ivan Toney, owned by 4.5% of the top 1,000. Those people have probably had a very good and surprising weekend. Not too much to take away from Bournemouth and Everton. Cody and Tarkowski both in passing tiers, but they're obviously chasing the game with an Everton player. And I think it might be the first time I've hit passing tiers this season, I want to say, because I feel like every week I go, I still don't think no one's hit it. You're only going to get it when they're really chasing the game like that anyway. So it's never going to equate to a haul very often. 7 tackles for Idrissa Gueye, 4 shots on target for Marcus Tavernier. 5 passing tiers for Liverpool players. Van Dijk and Thiago both in tier 2. Gomez, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Jost and Fabinho all in tier 1. Darwin Núñez, we mentioned some statistics about him on Monday's FPL podcast. 3 shots on target. Might be an interesting one on the other side, actually. A fascinating piece from the Forest Crystal Palace match. And I don't even know, having not watched the game, I don't know how to explain this to you. So Mark Guéhi and Joachim Andersen, 115 and 113 passes each.
What?
Monstrous.
They're just passing it to each other for about a 5-minute period or something.
But there's something else that has blown my mind with this. So Mark Guéhi plays left-sided centre-back for Palace, 115 passes. How many do you think for Tyrick Mitchell playing at left-back?
35.
15.
Nothing.
100 less.
He didn't even pass to his mate.
He plays next
on
to
his
him.
left.
It's blown my mind, mate. Literally.
And I think have played really high up.
No, well, I think what it is, Forest play with split forwards, right? So they've probably cut the passing angles to the fullbacks where exactly that. They've kept going back to each other. But that is incredible that one player could play next to each other in terms of position on a football pitch and one to complete 100 passes more than his teammate. Only Forest tier in the match was Cheikh Kouyaté, 4 tackles, who had the impressive number of 6 passes completed in 71 minutes. For Tottenham, Eric Dyer played right-sided centre-back with Clement Longley playing the central role. Dyer and Davis both hit passing tier, and it's not uncommon when Tottenham are chasing that they'll bypass the central centre-back because they're going forward at a quicker pace, and the wide centre-backs will pick up tiers. Tyler Adams, 61 passes, 3 tackles. Really impressed with him, having seen him live for the first time. Obviously, he was sent off, so he will be suspended for Leeds' first game back, which I want to say, so I think is against Manchester City, which will be a blow. Danny Ward, 6 saves against yourselves, Suj. 6.1 in this game. Perhaps not so much of a joke on the other side. We've barely spoken about him on the Sky Pods this year, but like with FPL, clearly the cheapest playing goalkeeper. Unclear if him or Wayne Hennessy will be Wales' #1 at the World Cup at this stage, by the way. It was shot and tackled here for Yuri Tielemans. Kieran Trippier, 5 tackles. Suj, that's where you got your little extra on top of the clean sheet, despite the booking. And also was the most of Newcastle's defensive players with passes, 50. And this is a growing number as well, where you've got him on 50, Dan Burn on 32. They do have a weightage towards Kieran Trippier's side. Nathaniel Chalobah, 56 passes for Chelsea. Thiago Silva, the only one to hit passing tier, 66. And that's despite only coming on as a substitute in the 7th minute. Saliba, 81 passes for Arsenal at Wolves. Ben White, 94 is really big for a fullback. Arsenal obviously got weighted towards their right-hand side because Gabriel only 59. Lewis Dunk and McAllister hit passing tier for Brighton against Villa. Moise Caicedo, 7 tackles, Suj. He's certainly on that list of Brighton Ecuadorian players we could consider this Sunday. He was also tackled here for Luis Boubacar Kamara, who returned to the Villa lineup, was one we had been looking at prior to injury, and also John McGinn. And for Manchester United, shots here for Rashford and Martial. Martinez, unsurprisingly, with the most passes, 52 though, is short of tiers. They're not quite coming at the moment, but remember, those 3 fixtures on the other side, Nottingham Forest, Bournemouth, Wolves, could be clean sheets and passing tiers. I think he'll be really popular, Martinez. And despite Fulham playing quite well, Bernd Leno made 8 saves. Paulinho has 9 tackles, as said, the most of any player in a Premier League game so far this season. First and second highest is him. He is still the tackling enabler to have, I'm sure.
Yep, he's been pretty decent.
And he's obviously been through his side of the suspension as well.
Nice.
Which
well,
is
we pick up
important.
another one.
There's a number of players which people might want to think twice about on the other side. Harry Kane's one. He's on 4 yellows, where he's an interesting one in the sense, particularly if England go out early, you know he plays all the games, but do you want to factor that into your thinking?
No.
It's the 19th game, not game week 19, 19th game that a team plays is the cut-off for 5 yellows.
Cool. Alrighty, that's a little wrap on some of the Sky stats. You can always hit rewind if you want to listen to all of that again with a bit of pen and a bit of paper. Should we talk about the World Cup?
Yes. Firstly, for anyone who's listening who's manufacturing the game or got a say in it, well done. Well done for putting this together. It's great. I think it surprised so many of us. I know not everyone's happy with the format, but I'm not going to complain about having a game that I didn't expect, and particularly when there's a nice bit of cash prize on the end of it for not a huge amount of work. There's probably 1,000 people that could win it, and the prize is much bigger than that, right?
Fair play.
That's genuinely how I would put it out there.
You think only 1,000?
I think a less than a top 1,000 finish would be... I'd be extremely disappointed if I didn't finish top 1,000 in this.
Okay. So, 100 million budget, 11 players, same point scoring as
all the same.
Sky. Fixed number of transfers per game week.
Correct.
3.
Correct. So the only difference to the normal kind of Premier League format is we get 3 transfers, 1, 2, 3, per match week, if you will, and that's to be used. So we're all on unlimited now, if you will, while we're picking our transfers. And then once Qatar and Ecuador kicks off on Sunday, up until the second match day of games, which begins, I want to say, with Wales and Iran on Friday
at 10
morning.
a.m. on Friday. Yep.
We can make free transfers. Well, it wouldn't be up to the Friday. You'd use it before the Thursday, wouldn't you? Would make sense. Yeah. So it's got to be used before the Thursday games that start with Morocco and Croatia. No, that's Wednesday's 10 a.m.
That's Ecuador, Senegal.
Switzerland, Cameroon is the Thursday 10 a.m. match. So you've got between Qatar and Ecuador starting to Thursday 10 a.m. you make free transfers. And then the same after that period up until the next set of the final group games, you can make another free transfers. And then during the course of the final third group games, you can make another free transfers. Then we have overhaul group stage between the group stage and the knockout round. Be very, very cautious now not to go out of your mind and get drunk on that Friday night of the final group games. Because the final group game is at, 7 o'clock on the Friday night, and then your deadline for overall Saturday the next day, the last 16 starts.
This is where a lot of people get screwed, don't they? Mm-hmm. You need to probably have it. Well, no, most of the teams by then anyway.
To be honest, my biggest concern is that Sky open the overhaul. It's my biggest concern. So, yeah, you're going to have less than a 24-hour period to fix in your overhaul because you can't do anything with it till that final day has begun anyway. So okay, I guess technically you've got 24 hours, but actually to know what all the fixtures are, you're probably going to have to wait till late on the Friday night. So my advice is don't go out and get drunk on that Friday night if you're serious about trying to win Sky World Cup. Stay in and watch the football and make some plans.
So there's 4 days per round, right?
Except the first one is 5.
Yeah, because of one game. There's no opportunity here for fixture gains.
None.
So this is where it's a little bit different.
Well, I say none. Let's give you an example. If you start with, let's just say Estupinan, because it's a player I've already used. You leave the money in the bank to move from Estupinan to perhaps Kieran Trippier, 7.8, very reasonable price. If you make that transfer on the Monday, you are getting 3 England fixtures versus 2 Ecuador.
Yeah, I understand. So if you're moving 2 teams that play later in the week, I get that, yes. How much does fixture game play in your mind in terms of strategy?
I think it still will here, but the actual 3-for-1s and stuff like that, it's not there. And the only time it would really be there is from match day 3 to the last 16, where you could get an overlap where some teams play twice. They'll play the last group game and the last 16 game. They'll play 2 games in between, one playing earlier in the week and then later in the week, the last 16, but we're all on overhaul anyway.
In the middle, so it kind of is irrelevant.
So the gains are not so much there. But interestingly, once we've kind of got the path of the last 16 and stuff, obviously you only want to be buying a player that's playing on day 2, which is of the last 16 semi-final and obviously the final. The 3rd, 4th place playoff does count, by the way.
Nice.
As far as I'm aware, you can still only have 3 players per team through the tournament. I don't think that changes. There's nothing in the rules. So like in most of the formats, and this is the same in the FIFA game, once you get into the knockout round, you can have like 4 per team. Right. This isn't like that. But in theory, there's 4 teams playing. We could all still have 11 going into the final and the 3rd.
You can't take hits to get players in.
No. And you can't roll any transfers. I've seen that mentioned a lot. Can you roll transfers? Sky doesn't work like that. Think of it as like the Friday to Thursday period, you can only use 5 transfers normally in the Premier League. Think of it like that. It's condensed to the match days. You have to use 3 in that period. Don't use them, you lose them. So there's no reason not to.
So does that make the most important thing in this game captaincy?
Yeah.
Okay.
To be very honest, yeah. And it's short form.
So I need to try and think, like if I was going through a step-by-step process to build my team, which I haven't, I've done an auto-select for now, but I wanted to record this podcast, pick your brains, and then go away and do it. I would be going through a step-by-step process of figuring out like what days are certain teams playing, and then for each of those days, making sure that I've got the captaincy covered as the best captaincy, and then from the best captaincy, making sure then I can fill in the gaps afterwards. Then there's always the within any group of 3 games, like you might win your first 2 and then you don't care about your last, or your first game, your last game might be your most difficult and you need to win. So understanding on a fixture difficulty rating when teams have the easy games and when they have the more difficult games at risk of putting them out. Wouldn't it be useful if there was a spreadsheet that had them laid out?
Which Ian Parron's got on the hub.
Oh, has he? Ian, have you made one? I don't know, has he?
Of course he has.
Oh, lovely job, Lee.
Yes, there's mine as well.
If anyone wants a fixture planning spreadsheet, then why don't you head over to patreon.com/planetfpl sales pitch coming in. You can join our Patreon. James produces a planner for Premier League, FPL, all of that kind of stuff as well, with fixture difficulty rating, best captaincy planner, shows the gaps between the games. If you sign up this month, December is free, and then January you'll get bumped up a tier as well. You might have heard that spiel before. Sales pitch over. Planner. So, yeah, figuring out the best captaincy for the best days is quite key then.
Yes, very much so. And I think what we'll do is we'll have a run through all the group games. We're not going to do a Sky-specific podcast next Wednesday because it's going to be out of date by the time we do it, right? So I'm going to be doing streams at 8 o'clock each morning next week when we've got these 10 a.m. games. So by all means, jump on YouTube, ask me Sky questions. I will cover them on those streams daily, and I will probably update, to be honest, what my own Sky plans are on those streams as well. Couple of key points first before we talk about captaincy. If I said to you, Sud, you need to think about, there's a couple of teams you need to start with. What springs to mind here? Without thinking about, in fact, yes, thinking about what transfers you're going to make. What teams does it feel like to you you're going to need to start with before we even talk about players?
Single game day.
Well,
so Ecuador.
There's that's first
One
point.
single game day, Ecuador.
A lot of people are thinking of skipping it. My take is get something, move it on. Move it on, get something in case the haul is there. Because if someone mildly popular does pop off with a 10-pointer times 2 or something, you are starting 20 points behind the field. And you are one short of captaincy of everybody else. Yeah. And I think there's even case for Casado's like 7.1, right? So there's periods in Sky this year where he's looked like a good asset. There's others where he hasn't. Is he capable of potentially hitting passing tier against Qatar? Yes. Is he possibly capable of hitting tackle tier in that game? Yes. Is there a small chance of an attack in return? Yes. Now, if that all happens, he's very interesting. Now, also at his price, could he just be your enabler? Could he just be your enabler at 7.1? Like how many times would we look at it in the Premier League format where Paulinho is the perfect example? Okay, great, and he's there when I need him as coverage for captaincy and stuff. Why would we not look at a Casado or an Estupinan or a Giuseppe? I think might be interesting at centre-back, or even the likes of one of the attacking players like Plata or Valencia. Why wouldn't we look at one of them and go, that can be my enabler? And of course, if you watch that first game and hate it, move it.
Yep.
So I think personally I'd have something. Personally, it would be one of the Ecuador players. I think the two Qatari forwards, and I forget the name of the other one, but they're both right cheap. I mean, it's 6.4 or 6.2. The problem is where you move that to. Yeah. And that's another reason why those two forwards at Qatar are handy, actually. They'll play a 5-3-2. They'll play up front together. They're decent. But where do you move? You're only moving that to a defensive player, aren't you, at a similar price? And I don't think we want it. So I think an Ecuador player, you just work your way backwards. So I used the Trippier example with Estupinan. If you want to start with Kieran Trippier, and you definitely don't want an Ecuador player beyond the first game, start with Estupinan, leave the money to move to Trips the next day. And the beauty of that with Trips is Trips goes first on the Tuesday. So if the England team did drop, and it's like, fuck, Trent's in the team, Trippier's not playing, what am I going to do? Well, contingency is think about what's your plan B, right? And I think it's a sensible strategy idea to be planning into buying players who are playing first to start with. So if you're going down the Ecuador route, why not leave the money? Why can't you go with Valencia and leave the money to buy Harry Kane on the Monday, for example, just in case? The Trippier example's better. Or you look at the later days, Argentina go first against Saudi Arabia on Tuesday. The Wednesday early game is Croatia and Morocco. That might be less of an interest to people. The early game on Thursday is Cameroon and Switzerland, which probably isn't going to have too much interest. But I think there's a few might be looking at Casado to Granit Xhaka, for example, as an example of something might be considered there. So I'm looking at it and going, well, I might leave the money for an England or Argentina player as kind of first transfer. That's one of the things I'm considering. The two teams I think we really need to start with, however, are Holland and England.
Because?
Why do you think?
Well, England play first.
So do Holland.
On the following week, you mean?
Yeah.
Right.
They're the two strongest teams in the two groups, right? You are probably going to want some
Wales
coverage
play
from
first, though.
Yeah, so do we. So do Holland.
On
the first day, right? You don't want to be sorry.
I thought you meant
you don't want to be using your transfers on the first day in match day 2, i.e. on Friday, because you do want that little bit of gain, right?
Yeah.
So psychologically, other than the first instance where yes, you can use the Estupinan to Trippier example as a pointer, but later on you don't want to be making that transfer the following week, right?
No,
it makes no sense. So the only opportunity really to buy England or Holland players is off of Ecuador in game 1. Therefore, if we want their assets, we should start with them. And actually, if anything, we should be considering coming away from them because they always go first, right? So my kind of strategy idea to start with is possibly to have 2 English players, 2 Dutch. Now, that might be that it's 1 English, like Ecuador to an England to make it 2. So I'm loaded towards the start of the week, and as the group stage is progressing, I'm possibly moving away from it. Remember, obviously, match day 3 doesn't really matter who we sell, right? Because it's overhaul afterwards. So you're almost selling your... Harry Kane is almost a kind of sell after the 3rd game, isn't it? He's going to be one of your biggest value players. Move that to somewhere else. So I think consider that. Don't look at the team right now and think... I think it is sensible to possibly have some coverage for every day. But if you're thinking... Do you know what? I don't like Kane against USA and Wales. You might be thinking, I just want him for Iran. I know he's going to be popular. I want to captain him. I'm happy to move that to Neymar next Thursday. Don't get trapped into the I have to start with a Brazil player who play on the last day, for an example. What I wouldn't do is 100% plan your free transfers in mind on the basis of having no cover. So one I'd be looking at is, I think Valverde of Uruguay is probably going to be quite popular. I think he's 8.6-ish or so. Been having a great season at Real Madrid. At the moment on the draft I've got him sitting there on the Thursday as a reasonable potential captaincy option against South Korea while Brazil play Serbia, which isn't the easiest game, right? What I don't want to do is get in a position where I have injuries elsewhere and I can't get to, if my plan was to get to Neymar and I can't get there and have nothing. So I think having something should be part of the strategy, but I still think at the same time, you should probably be planning to buy players on the Wednesday or the Thursday, or Argentina players Tuesday or England players Monday because they go first. That would
Makes sense.
And then the longer you go into that, you're just repeating the cycle. You don't want to be buying England or Holland players later on.
Right.
Captaincy, Qatar, Ecuador. So I think there are a number of options that we can obviously look at. I would personally go on an Ecuador player, even if it is just for the 1 week. At the moment, I might be leaning towards Plata. I think is a fairly interesting option, who's fairly cheap in the midfield area. Casado is definitely on radar. I looked at Ecuador, and honestly, the only team that I've looked at, Serge, in terms of passing numbers. And they're always short. Hezempe, who plays centre-back, he's young, he's only about 20, has actually been doing really well for Bayer Leverkusen in the Champions League this year. He's dirt cheap. But I probably don't want to leave it for the rest of the group stage. And I can't see anything on previous players. Hinsapi, his name is, 6.4. He's always 45 passes, 50 passes. It might even be that in terms of trying to hit a passing tier in the game, that the midfield players are possibly the best options. I think Plata at 7 million, most won't go near, and he could be an interesting one. He's a potential likely scorer. He'll probably play right of the front three. I think Casado is a very reasonable one. like I said, and he could arguably sit there for you. From the forward players, it probably would still be Enner Valencia, who's an experienced player, but he might play on the left of the front three. He's 7.1. And again, I think at that value, you might be looking to book something elsewhere. However, one player I've got, and I don't have, in the draft I've got at the moment, I don't have an Ecuador player because I'm going to work it backwards from what I want. I think there's a really interesting 7.1 forward who's not Ecuadorian. And that's Gakpo of the Dutch, 7.1. And again, we're talking about potentially starting with these players. I think he could be like a Valencia to a Gakpo on the Monday for the same sort of value. Interesting. The only thing
he'll play?
Gakpo, I think at the moment he'll start behind the front two. So Wijnaldum's not in the squad. So I think he's going to play that kind of position behind the front two, which Wijnaldum excelled at in the last Euros. Really had a good season. Leeds and Southampton were looking at him a lot last year. The Dutch are really strong defensively. They've got 5 good centre-backs in the squad. Up front, they're a little bit light. Obviously, Memphis Depay is in the squad. They may even start with Vincent Janssen, unbelievably such, against Senegal in that first game. So I think Gakpo, will play as the 10, if you will, behind the front players. I think he's really interesting at 7.1, actually. For the Monday captaincy, it probably is going to be England. I think you've obviously got the potential of passing tiers from the likes of Stones, Maguire. Obviously, you will get the benefit of England of seeing the team as well. If you're thinking about captain and defensive player, Trippier is much cheaper than the others. And he's not as likely to hit the passing tiers as Stones or Maguire, for example. If I think we can probably think those two will play. Obviously, Southgate is going to pick Maguire, I think.
Yep.
But you'd probably go Trippier. Obviously, H is going to be really popular up front. A note as well, if people want to look for a differential England player, Raheem Sterling, 9.8.
Cheap.
I don't think it's bad at all. And historically, he does the business
You
for
are
Gareth Southgate.
basing that
teams.
on his international form, though, not his
club
form.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't even pick him in the team. But I'm pretty sure that Gareth Southgate will start the tournament with him, would be my take. So I think Monday probably is an England player. I wouldn't be going a Dutch captaincy over him. I think Wales and USA Monday night is likely to be a very, very close game. Bookies basically can barely split those two in terms of who they think will finish second in the group. Now, Argentina and France both play on the Tuesday, and I think they're interesting further ahead as well because there's a case to say, do you need coverage from both? Now, we probably majority of us will think they will both win their groups, but they both have challenges. And like many of the teams, the most difficult game is the second. If you just jump to the Matchday 2 fixtures, for example, and I'm not going to do these by day, I'm going to do this by kind of, let's say, contenders to win the tournament. Brazil have Switzerland, it's not easy. Argentina have Mexico, not easy. France have Denmark. Germany and Spain play each other. England play USA. The Dutch play Ecuador. Portugal and Uruguay play each other. Belgium play Morocco. Like, there's not anything there. When you look at if you compare that to, say, match day 1, where Argentina got Saudi Arabia, France got Australia, Spain have got Costa Rica, England have got Iran, Germany have got Japan, Portugal have got Ghana, Belgium have got Canada, Denmark have got Tunisia, Uruguay have got Korea. A lot of the best fixtures for the nations are in match days 1 and 3. Which does mean I think the differential captaincies really might be in match day 2. But what would you fancy more, an Argentina player against Saudi Arabia or an Mbappe against Australia, for example? Like, you're going to get some split here. You could say, neither will be wrong.
Honestly, Jay, I don't know. I just think either could be. Right? Messi versus Saudi Arabia, like lick your lips. Mbappe against Australia, lick your lips. I'm really struggling. I don't know.
At the moment in the draft, I haven't got either.
Okay.
I've actually got Lautaro Martinez, who I think will play up front. He's 9.7. I think it's a very reasonable price. Not that Messi and Mbappe are unreasonable prices, by the way. But I just wonder if maybe the best decision is not to decide on either. Yeah. Just go a different way. Like, I think Martinez is capable of outscoring Messi, I think. And again, with Argentina, you do have the benefit of the team. So if you're going Martinez, you'll still want that comfort of seeing he's in the team, I think. You do get that on Tuesday. I think Emi Martinez is really interesting, by the way, 7.3. He is the highest owned goalkeeper in the game at the moment. We'll do a little bit of ownership in a bit. I've got Benjamin Pavard of France at the moment, 8.6. I think it's a very reasonable price. He's likely to play wing back. France have a number of good centre-backs. And should they win their first 2 group games, I imagine there'll be some rotation as well. And the same applies to Argentina as well. And in fact, it applies to a lot of teams. I think even in the case of this time, like I think if England beat Iran and USA and they've got the group 1, like I do think even England, like the likes of Kane, might not play against Wales. Yeah, I think that's possible for so many. This is why I think a lot of people have been saying, can we roll the transfer? Because we know from, and I think those who played UCL Fantasy will benefit with this kind of format because we know the problems that can arise in the final set of group games with rotation and stuff. And this tournament, because of the space in this time, really is going to be a headache for teams who've already qualified. Like I just think rest players, because you are 4 days pretty much throughout, other than a bit of a gap between the second round and the quarterfinal, and even that's subject to when you play in the second round. Like England could land with a 6-day gap between the second round and the quarterfinal. They could land with a 5-day gap between the last 16 match with Wales and the quarterfinal, depending on where they finish in the group. That's as good as it's going to get, and that's the only time, basically, as well. So I think Tuesday would obviously be Argentina, France. Wednesday, you've got Spain playing Costa Rica, Germany playing Japan. You've also got Belgium playing Canada and Croatia playing Morocco. I think they're good fixtures for all 4 of those nations. The temptation, though, I think, without, I would say, standout captaincy options from Germany and Japan, is to go back to what we know best in SkyFF, which is Kevin De Bruyne. Yep. 10.5 million. It's certainly a reasonable price considering his capability.
I added him in my draft straight away.
Lukaku's not had
best season.
Well, he's had injury problems. I'm not even certain that it will start for them in the first game, I think. Germany and Spain feels like a little bit of a lottery, I think, in terms of trying to pick the right assets. I actually don't have a Germany player in at the moment. I've got Rodri sitting in the draft at the moment. I'm not even certain if he starts, whether it's going to be him or Busquets. But I think in this tournament, I think you'll probably see a little bit like with Man City, where you can have certain games where Rodri will outpass the centre-backs, as happened this last weekend. I think you can get quite a lot of that. I looked back at some of Spain's numbers. They were actually, it wasn't just Ecuador. I looked at Spain as well. Looked at some of their numbers, and it can quite often be that Rodri will have the most in terms of passing numbers. And we do know over the last couple of years he has improved in terms of getting the odd attack in return and stuff. And as this is over such a short format, goal from a set piece or something like that can make all the difference. But I think KDB will be very popular Wednesday. Then Thursday, you've obviously got Brazil against Serbia. You've got Portugal against Ghana. I'd find it difficult, I think, to pick a Portuguese player over a Brazilian player at this moment. I think Darwin Núñez, Uruguay, could be interesting. Ronaldo, Nico. Yes. Nico would obviously say yes.
Seal of approval.
I'm not. I think I'd rather have Bruno Fernandes, to be honest. I think Nico's given it the wag finger, and I do trust his Portugal opinion. He's suing behind the camera, which is somewhat off-putting. Richarlison could actually be an interesting one. But I think there's an element of gamble in that in terms of whether he starts up front or not. We think he might have the favouritism as Brazil's central striker, and he's 8.9, which, if he's going to play up front for the favourites, it should potentially be considered a 2 million saving over Neymar. But I feel like that's more one where what can happen with World Cups is different. Obviously, team leaks has been a big fucking theme recently in FPL, wasn't it, Suj? You can certainly, with journalists, I think, in World Cup, get a really good idea of what a team's going to be 24 hours in advance. Right. I think, like, particularly if you take England in the tournament, it doesn't matter first game because we'll see the lineup. But quite often, the newspapers will have the team on the morning, and they're normally right. And I think we'll get more of that in terms of insight during the tournament without necessarily seeing the kickoff to have a really strong formed opinion. But I couldn't see it with my knowledge right now and think, he's going to pick Richarlison over Jesus, considering Richarlison's fitness issues as well. He's He's played 60 minutes for Tottenham last week. Is he at 100%? No.
Okay.
No, he's not. But I think 8.9 up front would be really interesting. Marquinhos at centre-back is probably worth paying a little bit extra for, I think, at 10 million rather than the other ones currently. I think Brazil might be a little bit weak in the full-back area. I think it might be their downfall if they don't win the tournament, actually. And I do think it's worth saying as well, they have a challenging group. But I think Brazil captaincy on that Thursday will be particularly popular. Looking forward to the second week. Now, it does open up a little bit more where you take Friday the 25th. What would we rather, a Dutch player against Ecuador or an English player against USA? Probably is still maybe the English player, but it might depend on what we see in the first group games.
You don't want to gamble on a keep for more versus Iran?
Or Bale.
Yep.
If you fancy it, right? I'm sure there's lots of Welsh listeners be like, I've got to have Gareth Bale. That's absolutely fine. You know he's going to be on all the set pieces and stuff. He's so talismanic for them. So, yeah, I mean,
price is Gareth Bale?
You could make a case for Bale against Iran. But I think with that, obviously then, you need to start with him, really.
Mm.
And I think 8.2.
All right.
It's reasonable. It's reasonable. I mean, you've got Moore at 6.9. If I thought Moore would play, I'd arguably go there. But then these strikers at this price, you're only going back to a defensive player, I think. You're going to find it really difficult to move between these guys. If you wanted to go with Bale, really you probably need to start with him.
Okay.
And the other problem you're going to have with him is how many minutes you're going to get out with him 4 days. Because you'll want him for the last game as well if you're going to go down that route, even against England. Now, obviously, you can come off after the last one, but it might be, you might look at it and think you're better off going, okay, could you go for Bale against America and Iran and then sell? Might be one way of looking at it. Saturday 26th, I think, is really interesting on the second match day because Argentina and France both have challenging games. Me and Suj are going on the piss with patrons to watch these. Argentina got Mexico, France have got Denmark. Lewandowski's got Saudi Arabia. And I think the instinct is, I don't want to start with that. But I think that's where when we get to that kind of second round of matches...
You transfer.
Yeah, but is Lewandowski a better captaincy playing for Poland against Saudi Arabia? He's not playing for France or Argentina, playing for Poland against Saudi Arabia than an Mbappe or a Messi Martinez with challenging fixtures, but they're still obviously extraordinary players. Lewandowski, I think, could be interesting. It's 10.3. That feels too expensive to start with. But it might be one we sit there and go, I want to punt him for captaincy when that comes round. Similarly, and I think this is another reason really to add into KDB, the next day Germany, Spain play each other, which I think is probably the most high profile on paper fixture in the group stage. Belgium play Morocco.
Simple. Cool, Morocco. I got them in the work sweeps there.
Probably. Mate. I got Wales. I got absolutely shafted. And then the final day, you've obviously got Brazil, Switzerland, Portugal against Uruguay. I think they're both challenging fixtures. Brazil go first, though. It's worth saying. No, they don't on that day, actually. Sorry. They're not the early kickoff.
Serbia.
And Cameroon is the early, so you don't see the team. But you would still expect them to pick a similar team from the Serbia. I think it's probably still Brazil rather than Portugal against Uruguay. And then, to be honest, the final group stage, I wouldn't be thinking about it too much right now because, like I said, if teams are through...
Mass rotation, injuries, all sorts.
It might be a bit of a crapshoot. What I'd probably advise from experience is looking at the final few days is going to teams where you're going to see the lineup. So, unfortunately, like if you take the final day, Friday the 2nd, Brazil aren't the early kickoff, but you could attack a Portugal player against South Korea or Uruguay player against Ghana, for example. Similarly, the day before, Belgium go early, but they're playing Croatia. But it might be that one's through and the other one's not, for example. On the Tuesday, Argentina are the early kickoff. They play Poland. It's also a challenging fixture.
No, they're not.
No, Wednesday the 30th, their final group game. Argentina's against Poland.
It's not the early kickoff.
Yeah, it is.
France, I've got down France, Tunisia, 3 o'clock. Denmark, Australia, 3 o'clock.
Oh, is it the other way round?
And Argentina, Poland, 7 o'clock.
Well done,
Mexico,
Suj.
Saudi Arabia.
Right, goes to update spreadsheet then.
France is the early kickoff that day. But then Mbappe or whoever you want to go with.
Well, then, yeah. But it could even be that it lands. What I'm saying is you could land at that point and go, I'm in trouble. But it might be like Giroud's in the team and hasn't been. You go, oh, I'll punt Olivier Giroud against Tunisia as a captain, for example. So I wouldn't get too bogged down in thinking, I have to know what my captaincy is for all 13 days. You don't. This is what the transfers are for, right? Think of it like this. There's 13 game days. There are 10 days where you can make transfers. And you've got, 9 transfers to use over that period. So you could look at it that way, and that's nearly one a day.
Yep.
Strategy ideas. So one, I think, is to look at kind of like a block defensive. We know certainly when we've had Premier League overhaul and sort of like game day 4, for example, a very experienced players looking at block defensive to try and get a leg up. The one I think probably to look at is Holland.
Dumfries, Van Dijk.
Dumfries, we think is fit, by the way. He did have an issue for Inter at the weekend, but he's kind of played it down on social media, and we think he's fine. Dumfries, yes, could be a very interesting one. What I can't tell you at this stage, honestly, is quite what the Netherlands starting lineup will be defensively. So I think, look, we can say Van Dijk will play 9.8, but when you look at the centre-backs, they've got De Ligt. He's obviously great, 9.1. Timber's having a great season, 8.9. Nathan Aké's really developed at Manchester City's 8.4. And even Stefan de Vrij, 7.5. It's not unthinkable that he could even start. They will play a back three. So you potentially got 3 players there who could hit the passing tiers together. And I like the idea of starting with them, because you could even blanket move it to something else right at the end. So you could go, right, I'll have the 3 games of blanket France, or even 2 games. Say they win the first 2 and you think, oh, they'll mass rotate against Qatar. You could then go blanket 3 moves even in match day 2 to another team possibly, if that's the sort of thing you'd want to consider. Dumfries at 8.9 is interesting. The only one I could put hand on heart right now and say I know from the back 3 that will start is Van Dijk. We think Blind will get the nod at left wing back. He's 8.4. Tyrell Malacia is also in the squad, 8.6. Don't have great cover for Dumfries, which is worth saying, 8.9. Do we think, how much weight should we put into passing tiers in this? Because it's such a short format. Is it? Should we actually
International football's a lot slower. So I'd say more.
Yeah, but then I think you probably got, with the heat as well, less pressure in midfield areas. So where I think people like Rodri will see more of the ball. Like I would think, like Declan Rice, I would think would probably hit passing tier, for example, against Iran. I wouldn't be surprised, and I wouldn't expect that often in an England shirt. So I did look at the likely temperature for England's first game. By the way, it will be about 30 degrees. It is still warm out there. It really, really is. It's a big acclimatisation. On that, with Holland as well, the other note with them is they don't have the last kickoff at all. A couple of their games are 7 o'clock. It's still going to be warm. So they don't have any of the I think it's 10 p.m. local time is the last kickoffs. So in Qatar, the kickoffs are 1, 4, 7, 10. England's game against Iran is 4 o'clock local time. Guys, you've been to Dubai and stuff. What's the hottest part of the day?
Middle of the day,
it's
obviously.
There-ish, isn't it? So, yeah, it is. When you watch some of these daytime games, it's going to feel like watching the Summer World Cup, where some of these games can be really slow, and I think that's to be anticipated. Yes, it should add to the passing tiers, but I also think the potential for goal-scoring attackers shouldn't be underestimated here, because it's such a short format. Mm-hmm. And we know from, obviously you don't have passing tiers in UEFA Fantasy, but last year the likes of Dumfries, Joachim Mæhle at Denmark, and these were good assets to have. Do you want that in your team, or do you want the extra 3 points? Well, I think you'd rather have the goal in 2 games rather than passing tier twice, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Is that the same? What does a defender get for scoring a goal? I've had a blank.
5 or 6?
7, isn't it? I think
it's 7. There we go.
Is it 6 or 7?
I will double check.
I mean, look, if you can find a combination of someone like Van Dijk, is obviously an attacking threat from set plays and will sit at the heart of Holland's back 3 and most likely hit passing tiers in a few of their games. At the moment, until I can identify who I really believe is going to play alongside him, he's in for me at 9.8, I think.
Cool.
Let me talk you through, Serge, some ownership numbers just briefly. I'm going to lick this from Frank's site, which I think was pretty much up to date last night. So only 3 goalkeepers currently owned by more than 8%. That's Emi Martinez of Argentina, 7.3. Thibaut Courtois of Belgium, 7.8. And Alisson, 8 million. I don't think Jordan Pickford, who's fourth on the list, I don't think it's a bad choice, by the way, 7.4. Mm-hmm. Pickford or Trippier? Pickford 7.4, Trippier 7.8. You know, Tripp's going to take a lot of the set pieces, isn't he?
I'll go Pickford at the moment.
Well, again, you probably a little bit more knowledge that he'll play. Hugo Lloris is 7.6 for France. Let's have a look at defenders for you. Trips is the most owned at the moment in the game. 25% owned. João Cancelo just behind that. 9.9 at Portugal. I don't know if that's a little expensive. I'm not sure on Cancelo. I know
he doesn't appeal massively off the bat, but
I just think they've got... I'm sure they'll go through. I think they've got challenging games, Portugal. I think Ghana, Uruguay and South Korea are all potentially challenging. I want to say, have you got South Korea last, Nico? So that Sonny could be back for that as well as potential differential. I'm not sure I would want to pay 9.9 for Cancelo personally. Van Dijk, who's 9.8, is 19% owned. Antonio Rudiger of Germany, 16.42% owned. Also above 10%, Dumfries, we've mentioned. Lisandro Martinez, 8.5. Not a certain starter, I would say. The reports I've read suggest that the two centre-backs might be Otamendi and Romero. Okay. So I'd be cautious of that if you've got Martinez. William Saliba's over 10% owned. I've no idea right now if he starts for France or not. They've got about 8 great centre-backs. Marquinhos of Brazil, I mentioned, is over 10% owned. Thiago Silva, Ivan Perisic, 8.1, could be interesting. Dalot, 8.4, I don't think it's a certain starter for Portugal either. Luke Shaw has just under 10% ownership currently as well. Not too many of these names going to be unfamiliar for you. Do you know Kevin De Bruyne's ownership, Serge? You probably looked.
No, I haven't, but I'm going to say 60%.
It's 53%.
Ooh,
next highest of the midfielders currently is Vinicius Jr., 28.7%, who I think, if you want a premium Brazil player, is a really potential good alternative to Neymar, actually. Phil Foden, 17% of teams, is the third most owned midfielder at the moment, which feels like a major gamble.
No, I did auto-select and he just got put in, so I think there might be a bit of auto-select in there, James.
There might be. I don't know. I think he landed in mine as well. I think he's one... If I wanted Phil Foden, I think I would leave the door open to go from the Ecuador player to Phil Foden. Okay. I'd want to know he's in that team. I don't think we know. I think we all think that Southgate will pick Sterling. And I think most of us would probably pick Foden and Saka at the moment. That's certainly what I'd do. But I'm pretty confident that Southgate will start the tournament with Raheem Sterling, I think. Others above 10% ownership. Luka Modric, Croatia, 8.2. Christian Eriksen, Denmark, 8.4. I think Pierre-Emile Højbjerg might even be a better alternative, actually. Jude Bellingham, 8.4. Been great in UCL this year, hasn't he?
Yep.
Will he be allowed to get forward in the same way? It's an interesting one. He's certainly more capable than what we've been able to see so far in an England shirt in terms of attacking returns. Saka, 9.4, 10.5%. I don't know if that's a better call than Foden or not. I guess it probably depends on the team. And Federico Valverde, who says, man, have a great season at Real Madrid, Uruguayan, is 8.6 million. He's probably the only name from top-owned midfielders who some might not be so familiar with, I think, actually. The rest have all played in the Premier League, basically, at some point. Looking at players owned by more than 6%. The midfield area, I think the only other one is Pedri, Spain, 8.2. Sadio Mane's in 7.5% of teams. He's not going to start Senegal's first game. They've said he's going to miss the first few games. So he's one where I think, particularly the second day, they've got the start of the second match, they've got Qatar at home. If he'd have been available, you'd go, potential good differential captain. But would you have the trust to look at someone like Ismail Assar instead? No, I don't think so. And finally, forwards. Mbappe's in over 50% of teams. Oof. Messi, 38%. Kane, 37%. Neymar, 24%. The only other forward owned by more than 10% currently is Darwin Núñez, who's 9.1. So you can see where this is heading, right?
Heavy hitters up top.
Well, yeah.
Also recognised names, I think.
Yes, true. One strategy obviously mentioned is blanket Dutch at the back. One idea, and I think this is dangerous, I wouldn't plan to do 3 of these moves, is jump between them. If you want to get better players in the rest of your squad, what's stopping you from using one transfer for an emergency and saying, right, I'm going to go Kane to Mbappe, Mbappe to Neymar. Now, the only thing with that is once you've come off Kane, because he's first the following week, like, you don't go back for Kane. You leave it, I think. But that is definitely a viable strategy where I think to get better elsewhere in your team, you leave yourself probably with one as a sitter. So it might be you need to leave Kane as the sitter and you jump from, I don't know, let's say you jump from Messi to De Bruyne to Mbappe. Okay. Those two of your transfers that week. And then you could, the following week, move Kane to Mbappe and start the chain again, for example. That's another way of doing it. All I'd say is if you're planning that and it's reasonable, I wouldn't plan that as 3 moves. I think it's maximum 2. Because most of us are going to have a problem, right? An injury, a suspension. You have to have a contingency in there, I think. So don't think you could plan just to go, right, every day I'm jumping from premium forward. 2, if you plan 2 in, I think it's okay.
Cool. And as James mentioned, I mean, there's a lot to think about. Everybody get your pen and papers out and start planning and reading all of the World Cup pull-out guides that we're going to get in all of the newspapers and all that stuff as well. There'll be a live stream each and every morning, 8 a.m. UK time.
So that'll be the 6 days, so the Monday to Friday the first week and the Monday afterwards. There'll be 8 a.m. streams. We're not too sure what we're going to do content after that yet. We'll see how the first few days go and make a decision. I may even do something from a Sky perspective on the morning of Saturday the 3rd, because anything before that it's not factual till the games are finished. I might do something on Saturday the 3rd that's Sky related on Patreon.
Nice. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed the break from
subject
Sky
to what
Premier
time
League.
England might play at 3 o'clock that day, and if they do, fuck it.
Nice. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the pod. Do give it a share if you did enjoy it. And let's get some people playing Sky Fantasy Football. And I hope it's one of us that wins the £10,000.
Someone listening to this is winning it.
Good stuff. Stay safe. Ciao for now.
Good luck, everyone. Play it your way. Cue music, please, man child.